Right now on Law&Crime Report.
If you're not going to proceed, there's the door.
Louisville, Kentucky's top cops walk out of a city meeting as the debate over the Breonna Taylor case heats up.
We can't control what the Attorney General's decision is going to be.
We discussed the city's search for a new police chief. Plus, one of the former officers in the Rayshard Brooks case is accused of vacationing while out on bond.
Something should be done.
Why the ex-cop is now suing the city. And a family of 5 detained in a parking lot. Why police say this was a big mistake. This is the Law&Crime Report, diving into true crime and all legal stories making the headlines. It's Thursday, August 6th, 2020. Welcome back to Law&Crime Report. My name is Bob Bianchi. We got a lot on the plate today, some excellent guests. As you saw, Louisville, Kentucky, in the Breonna Taylor case just keeps sparking up. Essentially, what happens was that the chief was asked to speak before the city council, got there, and prior to any substantive testimony, the lawyer for the chief objected to any questions being answered due to a recently filed lawsuit and indicating that that prevented the chief from speaking about the case. Let's listen to David Warneri, who is the attorney for the police.
Mr. Ricketts, as counsel for the committee, emailed us on July 30th a list of specific topics which would be covered, and those include vandalism and the response to it, use of tear gas and or pepper balls and how the media reportedly came to be targeted or came into contact with the same, placement of snipers or observers on rooftops, placement and use of lighting and sound equipment when dealing with the protests and others, warning to and communications with protesters and others, directives and any confusion relative to use of helmets or other equipment by officers, any stand-down orders, directives, guidance given or passed along to government responders relative to protests, vandalism, etc., and how or why law enforcement came to be at Dino's the night David McAtee was shot. With the understanding that today's proceedings would not encroach on and potentially affect the integrity of the investigations underway by the Kentucky Attorney General's Office or the Federal Bureau of Investigation through the United States Attorney's Office for the Western District of Kentucky, Chief Hess and Chief Schroeder agreed to voluntarily appear. They too believe it's the right thing to do. Unfortunately, since we made the commitments through counsel for today's appearance, a significant development has transpired, and that is on July the 30th, a federal civil rights lawsuit was filed against Louisville Metro government, against Mayor Fisher, against Chief Schroeder individually, and against 19 LMPD officers. This lawsuit, which completely overlaps the agenda, seeks compensatory damages, seeks punitive damages, and perhaps more importantly, seeks prospective injunctive relief, which could limit LMPD's efforts and ability to manage future protests. Given the recency of the filing of that lawsuit and the complete overlap, if this body wishes to go forward today, the law mandates that it go into closed session. And if this body votes to go into closed session, Chief Hess is prepared to answer any questions.
All right, Eric Johnson is a criminal defense attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, and Julie Rendelman, former assistant district attorney and now criminal defense lawyer, host and legal analyst at the Law&Crime Network. Welcome to the show, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Eric, okay, let's go to you first. Make out for us and the audience here as to exactly what is being said. And it seems as if they're saying they thought they were coming for one reason, but now that the lawsuit is filed, that this should be handled in executive session. In other words, we're not saying that we won't help the city do the investigation, but we're not going to do it in public. Is there any legal basis for that?
Well, the reason that they want to do that is because anything that they say, because there's a lawsuit going on, anything that they may say that could be recorded could be possibly used against them in that civil lawsuit at a later time. And as the attorney stated, given that the lawsuit covers primarily basically the same issues that the council wanted to hear about at that particular time, any testimony that they gave to the council would be testimony on subjects that could possibly come up in a civil case. So as their attorney, he counseled them that they would not want to do that in an open forum where that stuff could be used at a later date.
Yeah, Julian, of course, every jurisdiction is a little different, but to Eric's point, it's something that's very similar that I've seen here done in Jersey, that when you're dealing with employment issues or lawsuits, they go into routinely executive session for the very reasons that Eric stated. What's been your experience?
The same, and and look, it's a no-win situation. I think the public wants information, and so they want to hear from the various members of the police department in terms of how these things were handled. But they have lawyers, and we're all lawyers, and every lawyer here, I think, would say the same thing to our clients, which is we don't want them talking, certainly not in public, because anything they say can be used at that civil. In terms of the civil case, particularly one of them is, I think, being charged personally, not just, in terms of his capacity, with the police department. And so I think it's a no-win situation for them, but I think they're right in terms of recognizing that there is such an intertwining regarding these two issues that, a closed session is probably more appropriate.
Eric, Julie, I'm just interested in a quick response to this. I've been saying for months now, and I mean no disrespect to anyone who has a passionate feeling for some of these cases that we've been covering here at the Law and Crime Network, but I am concerned that the public outcry, and I understand the public outcry, is overwhelming what are standard legal procedures that are followed day in and day out in multiple jurisdictions merely because people are trying to score political points, or maybe they fear not being transparent. I'm afraid we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater when we're changing the rules. These are people who are litigants and they have rights. What are your thoughts about that, Eric?
Well, I think you're exactly correct in that. I think that it's a fact that the social media and the society at large does not know how all of the branches of government interact with one another. And the fact that even though this is more of an executive hearing, their judicial rights are implicated, and there are things that they have to take care of and need to be protected, even though this is a public counsel forum.
Right. Julie, to Eric's point, are we going down a slippery slope here? Once you start making exceptions, non-legal exceptions, and changing the rules, what effect do you think that may have, rippling effect through the judicial system in its entirety? Because people will now point to these kind of things and say, well, they did it there. Why can't we do it now?
I think it is a slippery slope, and it's a problem. And the truth is that, it's hard for us as attorneys. We constantly talk about these cases, and they're serious cases. And many times when I speak, I get kind of repercussions from people watching, being offended by some of the things I say. Many of the things I talk about are based on the law. It's not my own personal opinion. It's based on the law as I see it in terms of how the facts apply. Sometimes things happen that are egregious. That doesn't necessarily always mean someone is guilty of a crime, or it doesn't mean necessarily someone is civilly responsible. The facts, at the end of the day, will be, determined by a jury if it gets that far. But I think we have to be very careful, particularly when it comes to situations like this, that individuals' rights are respected. And again, these are the attorney's decisions, not their client's decisions.
Yeah, you make a great point. I mean, there's legal issues, factual issues, and we understand based on non-sensationalized cases the way it goes, and the public doesn't. And they're thirsting for information. A lot of times they want their side one way or the other to be proven, and that is sometimes problematic. Well, the city council person who was running this proceeding after listening to the objection to the attorney, his name is Brent Ackerson. He's a city council member who spoke out. Let's take a listen.
Behind that and try to move these proceedings out of the public eye is something that I'm not in agreement with. Based upon the opinion of our legal counsel, I don't think that we're required to do that. Now, if the chief, and if either one of the chiefs here decide they're going to invoke that, then I'm disappointed, because the facts that you'll testify here today, you're going to be testifying to anyway in that civil lawsuit. Now, if it's the lawyers saying we want to control that information for a while, or maybe to finesse our stories, I don't care about that. I don't care about either of these lawsuits. My sole focus is to get the truth out to the public about what's happened and why. And I will say this. I've said it once, I'll say it twice. I don't care about the damage, the monetary damages involved here, because they are what they are. They'll be based upon the facts of that case. As far as injunctive relief, the injunctive relief will be based upon what a judge decides, a federal judge. If a federal judge decides that we're doing something wrong and injuncts us, then great. Thank goodness. If somebody says that we've done something wrong, then we should stop it. I welcome that injunction. If that judge disagrees and says we're not doing anything wrong and doesn't issue an injunction, then I welcome that too, because it means we're doing the right thing. I don't care. But here's the reality. We're not going into executive session. There will be nothing hidden from the public regarding this matter. Zero. Plain and simple. So, with that being said, if you're not going to proceed, there's the door. If not, let's get down to what we came here to do today, and that is get the truth out there. Either way, it's your all's call. But I appreciate your opinion, and I respect you tremendously, but your job is to argue for the defense of your client. I have been there too as a lawyer. Sometimes I've even argued the world is flat, knowing it's not, because that's my job as a lawyer. And so with that being said, I think we know where we're at here today, and so it simply boils down to this: stick around and let's talk and put things on the record, or you need to leave.
Well, with that, I think we will respectfully excuse ourselves from these proceedings. I would like to say we're still committed to coming back without being compelled by subpoena, and we're committed to having this discussion in an open meeting. Today is just not the day for that. Thank you.
Yeah, Julie, I don't even know how to unpack all that. I will push back on the concept that our job as lawyers is to bring false information like the world is flat.
I was just going to say the same.
It's just a disheartening thing. Yes, zealous advocacy is important. Making sure that you can test the proofs is important. Whether there are sufficient proofs is important. And so are legal principles. But I think tactically, this city council member did a little bit of grandstanding, but he lost an opportunity. He lost an opportunity to get them in executive session, get data and information in my mind, and then play the stunt later by subpoenaing them to come back and testify publicly. He just let them walk out the door. So his idea of what lawyers do, Julie, and his tactics as a lawyer, I somewhat question. I think he was acting more of a publicity thing. What do you think?
I think it was a publicity thing. There is an argument to be made is if they subpoena them and they can get them to speak publicly, then that kind of gets what he wants, which is to get them to speak publicly without having to do this executive session. So I would say that, maybe he has an argument there. At the end of the day, I agree. He's grandstanding. He should be grandstanding. That's what his job is. I do laugh when he talks about, I don't care what the monetary amount is. I don't care what the injunctive relief is. Keep in mind, Schroeder, is personally named in the civil lawsuit. So he cares when it comes to the monetary aspect of it. So it's easy to say that and put on a performance. At the end of the day, I think he too, if he's a lawyer and actually knows how to do his job other than lying, because I've never told anyone the world is flat, that he recognizes that the attorneys for these individuals have a point.
Eric, when was the last time you ever heard a city council person or any governmental entity say that they really don't care about how much money or what the damages are? And what are your overall thoughts about how this city council member conducted himself in this?
I mean, this was a typical social media tirade, grandiose, very much so. I mean, the principle that the lawyer was trying to invoke, protecting his client's rights but against self-incrimination, is something that if this council member was a lawyer, he knows is fundamental to the defense of your client. So I believe that he was just trying to do this so that the council itself may save face with the public and not seem that they're in cahoots, because the public may say that, oh, well, you're just going along with it. You're trying to shut it up and get it behind closed doors also. So I believe that it was more of a statement to the Louisville public that the council is trying to be forthcoming and upright about what's going on.
Yes, excellent commentary, guys. Look, really enjoy having you on the show. We got a lot more here. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to Law&Crime Report. We're going to continue with the Breonna Taylor case. As you guys know, this is under investigation by the Attorney General's office. So there's going to be a decision one way or the other, and there's a lot of hot tempers on both sides of this equation. So we're going to be listening to the mayor, Glenn Fisher of Louisville, Kentucky, about what they anticipate or are planning one way or the other, depending on what the AG's decision is with regard to safety issues. Let's take a listen.
I think there's a lot of discussion around how the community is going to respond, right? And so it's a range of responses. What obviously we hope is that when people think, all right, we can't control what the Attorney General's decision is going to be, but we can control how we react to that. And when people say we want justice for Breonna, there's the case itself, and the truth in the case will probably dictate what is going to happen there. But then there's a much bigger picture to me about, what justice for Breonna means. And justice for Breonna means that her nieces, her nephews have the same opportunities as a privileged family has, a privileged white family has. Justice for Breonna means that everybody deserves their day in court. Justice for Breonna means that we're a city and country of racial equity. Bigger issues that we've always been working on, that everybody can work on those as well. And I hope that's where the energy of the streets can take that to what justice really is, and advocating for change and voting and doing all the type of work that's involved in making us a better city and a better country. So we have obviously a public safety plan for the day of the announcement, but then we also have this bigger plan, right? That's really what justice is going to be all about, and I hope that's where people decide to exercise their passion into making us a better city and a better country. Everybody can participate in that.
Yeah, so Eric, I think this was a very measured statement. I think what the mayor is doing there is preparing the possibility that there may not be criminal charges. And I know that some folks may be completely shocked at how could that even be. But there are issues here with respect to whether a prosecutor can prove case beyond a reasonable doubt in a scenario in which an officer is shot and they return fire. As unfortunate and as sad as that is, there are multiple remedies that the Taylor family has. Criminal could be one of them. Civil certainly could be one of them. What are your overall thoughts about the possibility there may not be charges? And what do you think the public's reaction is going to be? I'm going back in my mind to what was happening during the Rodney King riots.
Well, I think if they do decide not to charge them with something, that would be very unfortunate. I think there will be some form of unrest in the city of Louisville if that were to happen. I mean, the mayor is trying to prepare the city for it without coming right out and saying that don't riot if there aren't any charges. But that's effectively, as you said in his measured statement, what he was trying to accomplish, to try to cut it off before it happens, because that is a definite possibility, while it would be a very unfortunate one.
Yeah, and Julie, as a criminal defense attorney and a very experienced person, and a person who was a prosecutor on the other side, during the course of this investigation, there's going to be an opportunity for the officer to give his statement, or their statements, if they choose to do so. What are your thoughts about the defense in the case? What do you think is happening behind the scenes in terms of what the police are doing, if they're cooperating, and if they're cooperating, whether or not this issue of them being fired at first and returning fire would be a defense you would be posing to them right now by asking them not to charge?
So I think, we've spoken at length about this case, throughout, being on the show, we always have to distinguish, as you talked about, the aspect of the absolute, horrific nature of the fact that she died the way she did, and whether or not it's a criminal case or whether or not it's a case that should lead to changes in the way the police do business. We talked a lot. One of the biggest things about this case, I think, for everyone was the whole aspect of a no-knock warrant, because that was one of the aspects that kind of people talk about is one of the big problems that brought this case to where it is. And obviously also some mistakes along the way as to coming to this apartment, coming to the right apartment. I don't think there's any, as far as I'm concerned, I think that there's going to be some major issues going forward with a criminal case, being able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these individuals acted with the intent and that there was no justification based on the law, not based on whether or not you think it's absolutely horrific that Breonna Taylor died the way she did, not based on the fact that there needs to be major police reform, but based on the facts of this specific case. And I think there's major problems. And I think there's going to be protests, whether or not they come back with criminal charges or whether they don't. I think either way, people are going to want to speak out.
Eric, what do you think about Julie's assessment? It was very well articulated, Julie, as always. about what lawyers do is they get away from the emotional pieces to this, but that justification, quote unquote, that Julie's saying are actual defenses that are in the law that are used each and every day when people are charged with things like murder or aggravated assault. What did you think of Julie's assessment?
I think that her assessment was spot on in this particular situation. However, I must respectfully say I don't think it necessarily applies. In this particular situation, while the issue, I think the biggest one is that they were at the wrong house. The fact that they were at the wrong house pretty much invalidates a lot of the stuff that they were trying to say as their defense. So I think in this particular situation, they were at the wrong house. Breonna Taylor and her boyfriend were lawfully there where they were supposed to be. He lawfully, if it was somebody else just break into the house, he would have had the right to shoot him. And if the person who broke in the house had returned fire and killed Miss Taylor, they would be charged with felony murder. So only because they were police under the impression that they were supposed to be there lawfully is why this is even dragged out as it is right now.
And you know, it's crazy to say, but I've seen a number of cases where the police have inadvertently done the same thing, gone to the wrong house. That's an issue that makes it a great civil case, but I'm uncertain that Julie, let me put it this way, change it. I'm certain that Julie's analysis on justification is going to be an issue with respect to the criminal charges. We'll wait and see what the Attorney General's office does, but this is going to be a triable case if charges are brought in the criminal side. Civil, I think they're dead in the water, the police. All right, the mayor has something to say about all of this. Let's take a listen.
Yeah, the world's changed in 8 years, characteristics, but we're at a different time right now. And so I think there'll be different candidates for this job. So this next chief has got to be seen by the community as somebody that is going to lean into all of these issues. The challenge one of the challenges of being a police chief is you've got to be able to communicate inspirationally both to the officers, as Officer Grider has mentioned, but then to the community as well, and be that kind of bridge between all those groups until they kind of come together as one and co-produce public safety together. So kind of public communication, being inspirational, very important.
Mayor, one more question to first being attuned to hiring in this type of situation. Are you referring to a city who's hiring a police chief in a time of controversy or similar?
No, what I meant was PERF is a national organization that frequently does police chief searches for different cities. So they've got their finger on the pulse of who's good, who's looking, who would be a good fit. They just have a bigger perspective of national scope. My hope is, before we use the Southern Police Institute at the University of Louisville, I thought that would be useful to have a real kind of local feel for what we needed. But this time I felt it was better to jump up and go with a national organization.
Okay, so that's Mayor Greg Fisher. Let's put this into context a little bit. The Louisville police chief was fired after the police shot and killed a man during a response to a curfew violation in June. And that is what he's referring to. Eric, the firing of the police chief for one of the officers having shot, we don't know the circumstances, and killed the man. I believe some of the news articles are indicating that they were shot at and they returned fire. Was the firing of the police chief the right move here?
I think that it may, without letting the investigation take its course, it may have been rather premature. But given the public sentiment and the political nature of the mayor wanting to possibly keep his job, I think that's why they may have rushed to judgment, similar to the situation down here in Atlanta in the Brooks case.
Yeah, boy, we maybe get a little bit to that, and I don't disagree with you at all. Julie, I mean, again, we're getting back to the same point that Eric brings up, is that we're just doing these rush maneuvers here so that it looks good in the public eye, I guess, or that's how these elected officials are perceiving it. But what tone is it setting to the police chiefs around the country that if any of your officers make a mistake, you could be the greatest police chief in the world, there's going to be a statistical percentage of people that are going to do something stupid, wrong, or just outright criminal, that the response is going to be, you're fired. I mean, what's going to happen to the next chief when somebody's killed?
Yeah, it does set a bad tone, and it also makes it difficult to find the next chief. Keep in mind, in this case, I believe he was set to retire, so it doesn't have as much of an impact as it would if he was, a fairly young guy who was, just getting started. But look, people want someone to blame, and so it's easy to go after the chief and take him out of the equation. I agree with Eric. I agree with you, though. It's a bit premature. I think it's important to do a full investigation. At the end of the day, if the investigation yields that protocol wasn't done and he's responsible, then he shouldn't be there anymore.
Yeah, real quick, Eric, to Julie's point, do you think it's going to make it more difficult finding the next chief who's going to be saying, well, the next thing that could be happening to me next?
It all depends on what they do within the department, because this is something that police chiefs all across the country are going to face. So it doesn't just matter in Louisville. So any prospective chief will know that this is a possibility if they choose to take the position.
Yeah, I mean, and just to both of you real quick, typically speaking, what happens in scenarios like this is that actually we're going to take a break, but is that they do an investigation and they determine whether or not the conduct or lack of conduct from the chief caused or was the cause of it, but that did not occur here. Sorry, guys, I would love to ask you that question. We'll keep the audience waiting for the next time we're on the show together. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Law&Crime Report. My name is Bob Bianchi. We are following presciently. Eric was talking before, our guest, about the Rayshard Brooks case out of Atlanta. The DA has announced that one of the officers charged, Garrett Rolfe, actually vacationed in Florida, and they're arguing that that is a violation of his terms of his bond. Let's listen to the victim's wife, Tamika Miller. That's Rayshard Brooks' widow, as she discusses this new development.
I would just like to say that I was baffled when I heard about this. It was very hurtful. It let me know that Officer Ralph did not care about what the judge had laid down, as well as caring about how anyone else would feel on his behalf by vacationing. I'm hurt. And again, I'm just wondering, when will justice be served? When will things change? It hurts. And I feel like something should be done.
All right, that's Rayshard Brooks' widow. Eric, when we were on break, you had some thoughts with respect to whether or not this is a serious violation. This is down in your neck of the woods. I'm interested in what you think is going to happen with regard to this probably bail revocation proceeding that may occur if the district attorney files it. And also, as a defense lawyer, how are you defending the officer in this case?
Well, I think that the bond revocation motion definitely will be filed because of the optics and the national exposure in this particular case. It gives off the impression, as the wife said, that he may not care. However, what he does while he's on bail, as it relates to other people's optics of the situation, it really is irrelevant as it goes to his legal rights as the defendant in this case. If I was his attorney in this particular matter, I would have advised him not to take the trip, given that he is basically a public figure now. Anywhere he goes and what he does is going to be under observation. However, also as his attorney, I will point out that there are 4 factors important to determine whether or not a person has violated bond. True enough, the judge did not want him to leave the state. However, in him leaving the state, he did not intimidate any witnesses, frustrate the administration of justice. In no way did it mean that he would not come back to court, nor did he commit any other felonies while he was vacationing. So while it was a violation of the bond by a technical letter of the order by say, I do not believe as his attorney, if I was his attorney advocating for him, that it would be enough to revoke his bond overall.
Well, Julie, Eric laid it out for us, and he's down there in Atlanta. How much, and I keep going back to the same refrain, are judges, in your opinion, feeling pressured by this public outcry to maybe revoke the bail when in an ordinary case they would not? Do you think there's any possibility that that bleeds into the judge's decision?
I think it does. Look, I don't know this particular judge, but I think it's inevitable in any jurisdiction that the public opinion, the public pressure does impact what a judge's decision is. It's not supposed to. Again, we go back to things we've been discussing this whole time. It's about the legalities. It's not about whether or not, a family member wants him incarcerated. It's whether or not legally he should be put back in jail. I'll go back to one thing that Eric said and we talked about before. As far as I'm concerned, optically, in a case like this, on what planet would an attorney ever tell their client, oh, go for vacation? We're not just dealing with, the racial strife that is going on that surrounds this case. We're dealing with a pandemic that surrounds even Florida and the Atlanta area. There's nothing about this that looks good. It's not helping his case. And by the way, at the end of the day, a jury is going to be deciding this case, and a jury's watching this, and they're watching what he does, and they're watching whether or not he seems to care. And it shouldn't matter, but it does.
Yeah, look, let me ask each of you, does this get into evidence during the course of the trial? Do you think the prosecution is going to make a crafty argument so that they can be in summation saying, this is the manner in which this guy takes this serious case? He goes on vacation. Unfortunately, Rayshard can't go on vacation. Do you think that comes in at all? Is it legitimate, Eric?
I think that if it comes in, they will bring it in doing voir dire because they will try to find out which potential jurors may be influenced one way or another with regards to this, to find out which ones will hold it against them. There's also the possibility to eliminate those that may not think it's that serious. So I think it'll come up in jury selection more so than during the trial.
Okay, so in other words, Julie, Eric's point of view there is it may be something that they'll try to use in voir dire and to make sure that jurors aren't prejudiced. What do you think about the admissibility?
I don't see any basis for it being admissible in terms of, I mean, I guess one could argue a bad act, although I think that it would be more prejudicial than probative. I'm not sure how it would push the ball forward regarding whether or not he committed this crime. I agree with Eric. There's going to be a lot of coverage in terms of what jurors have seen and what's impacting their ability to be fair in this case. And that may very well be one of them.
Okay, well, we got former Officer Rolfe is also suing the city of Atlanta, filing a civil suit against the city of Atlanta, saying he was fired without a proper investigation. Let's listen to the victim's attorney reacting to Rolfe's lawsuit.
Because common sense and fully understanding, especially having legal counsel, Officer Rolfe should not be vacationing in Florida, which we believe is a full violation of his bond and furthermore shows the mental state of this officer to feel that he can just go on vacation after being charged with the murder of Rayshard Brooks. So it is mind-blowing, it is disappointing, and it is telling for the current state of affairs when it comes to Rayshard Brooks. An entire situation that has been nothing but disrespectful from his reactions that night, followed by Bill 838, followed by him suing his own chief and the city to try and get his job back, and now going on vacation. I think we've seen the true understanding of Officer Rolfe, and I believe that all of the people that donated to him to get him out of jail were not donating so he could go lay on the beach.
Yeah, Eric, got to go to you. You're the resident expert there. I've been talking about this a lot on the Law&Crime Network. So I want to know what your feelings are about the comments of that lawyer. But there seems to be a lot of press conferences that are being allowed to occur during the pendency of both criminal and civil actions, where I know in my state, there would either be a gag order or it would borderline be an ethical issue. What are your thoughts? Or what's it like down there?
Well, I mean, they happen all the time with regards to these type of cases, whether or not, as far as from the defendant's perspective, they're fair and may be prejudicial to the potential jury pool. I think that they may be. The attorneys for the family, while well-meaning, really have nothing to do with the prosecution. So therefore, potential jurors may interpret their feelings, their views on the case as actual legal principles that would not be brought up by the prosecutor. So it's something that they may need to address in this particular situation as it goes forth with these particular cases that have high media attention.
And Julie, talk to us, since you've handled some very high-profile cases, of the difficulty there is in voir dire and selecting a jury when you have so much of these peppering of press conferences that are out there and you're trying to get a fair and impartial jury.
And we saw this in the Harvey Weinstein case. You had people giving press conferences right outside the door where the jurors walked by, and a judge was allowing that to happen. And so, unfortunately, there's so much attention that is drawn to this matter. We have video of the incident. So it's hard for any juror to, any individual to not know something about the case. At the end of the day, a jury's going to have to be chosen that knows about the case, but that can be objective, even though they've seen everything. That's going to be incredibly tough, but I don't think there's anywhere in the world they'd be able to go that wouldn't have heard about this case.
Right. And to both of you, I asked this question too. We also know that there are going to be a significant amount of jurors that know how to answer those questions the judge asks You've seen it, but we disregard what you've read, and we do it only based upon the testimony and the evidence that's produced in this courtroom. They know what the right answer is. How many of these or would you be concerned if you were a defense lawyer or even a prosecutor for that matter that have a political agenda about trying to get on that jury? Eric?
Well, that's something that you have to take into consideration if you choose to be the defense in this case. If you choose to take this case, that's something you're going to have to deal with. As you said, the people who know how to answer those questions. So you have to find other ways to flesh out those issues to get the points that you want to get out. Because there are people, as you say, professional jurors who know how to answer certain questions. So you have to be able to figure out ways to get your points out around that because you're the lawyer, they're not. You have the skill, they don't. So you have to figure out a way to get them to tell you what you want them to know.
Julie, picking a jury, in my opinion, is an art form. I don't think lawyers spend enough time in thinking about those particular issues. But if Julie Rendelman were the defense lawyer for the former police officer right now, what's the kind of juror that you're looking for in your mind that would be fair and impartial? Where do you want to go with that?
I hate answering that, and nothing against the question. It's, I think every time you pick a jury, it happens to be, it's about the case, but it's also about who seems to like you. I mean, I hate to say that you're the face of that case. And if you can get a juror, even a juror who may in somewhat support the other side, but really likes you and wants to hear from you, that sometimes is the most important thing, is the relationship between you and that juror. The other issue is that you want to make sure, obviously, some judges only allow for 5 minutes of voir dire. They don't allow you to flesh out the case. And so it's imperative in a case like this that you make sure the judge understands there are questions that need to be asked, prying that needs to be done to make sure these jurors are not just answering questions the way you want them to, but answering questions honestly.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it down there, Eric. Again, you're a resident expert. Do they allow the lawyers to ask questions and talk to her? If they do, they used to in death penalty cases here in Jersey, but it's an art form because while you're asking those questions, you've got to be careful not to offend the juror who may be qualified by the judge to sit on your case.
Well, for the most part, judges down here, they give you great latitude in asking questions as long as you're not being repetitive or going into too personal issues where you may embarrass the jurors. In my experience, I've had wide latitude with regard to types of questions and the length of the examinations that we can have of potential jurors. Some judges like you to submit the questions and they approve them ahead of time. So there's a different style of dealing with that as well.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, guys, thank you for the awesome commentary. Unfortunately, we got to take a quick break, but we will be back, so stick with us. All right, welcome back. Listen, Aurora, Colorado, police officers handcuffed 5 family members. They were pursuing a stolen vehicle complaint, found this family, mistakenly thought that they were involved. Let's take a look at what these officers did here.
This is some bullshit. You had guns on that kid.
We're going to take care of that in a
Okay, Julie, Eric, on the left side of that screen, to make matters even worse here, is a little 6-year-old girl that had that pinkish hair that's on the ground with I mean, I just, in my mind, I'm thinking like, what will go through that little girl's mind for the rest of her life over something? From what I gather from these facts, they were going for a spa day. They had done absolutely nothing wrong. The police got it wrong. I believe they were looking for a stolen motorcycle, if I read this story correctly. And so, Eric, I'll go to you first. I mean, even if you can do things like this as a police officer, and I used to say this to my staff all the time, just because you can doesn't mean you should. There were a million other ways that they could have done this safely without traumatizing that family. Thoughts?
Well, I completely agree. I think that nationwide there needs to be a total review with regards to police policies, with regards to interaction with the public. In this particular situation, even though they say that they were following a stolen car suspect, if they had just asked for her license and registration, that would have immediately dispelled their rumors and been done with the situation. It would not have had to escalate to the point that it did. I'm just thankful that there were no black men present at this time, because this situation might have been much worse. The fact that there were 6 women in this particular vehicle is bad for them. And I mean, the police department in Aurora really needs to check and see what it is that they're doing, because they've had multiple incidents of these type of aggressive behaviors.
Yeah, I mean, Julie, just throw it to you. What do you think about this mess?
I had so much trouble watching this the first time, and the second time. I believe the pink hair is actually a crown this adorable girl is wearing because they're headed to a spa day. I think one of the points you make is just because you can doesn't mean you should, and so there has to be some level of discretion on the part of police officers to make the right decisions. Keep in mind, police officers are right in terms of any time they stop a vehicle, there is a danger to them. But there has to be a logical reaction to what's happening. And here you have these 5 individuals laying on the ground. I'm not sure that was the necessary approach in order to figure out whether or not this was a stolen vehicle. It seems quite extreme, and it is absolutely unbearable to watch.
Yeah, Eric, it's got to be a better practice. I will tell you from having gone through PTC, Police Training Commission, they are constantly pumping in the minds of the officers, and not that it's wrong, but that motor vehicle stops are the number one way they're not going to go home, that they can be shot. But I also used to say to our officers, you have to use the rule of reason with respect to how you're approaching these scenarios. So this is definitely, in my mind, a training issue as well. I'm not saying that these cops went out there with the idea, let's traumatize this whole family, including a 6-year-old. But like to your point before, somebody's got to do a thorough investigation in the manner in which they're stopping and detaining people. I mean, under the Constitution, you can do detention, investigative detention, but I don't think they envision that under Terry.
No, not at all. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying, in the fact that these police officers have to figure out a way to deal with the people in a way that takes into consideration that not everyone is a criminal. The fact that you emphasize that they say all the time that traffic stops are the most dangerous part of your job. Well, most traffic stops are based on traffic offenses and not as a result of a violent crime. So that means most traffic stops are for people who've done nothing more than commit a traffic violation. That assumption that they're inherently dangerous in and of itself creates this impression where the officers are basically scared for their life every time they stop a car. So they're more worried about their safety than the proper execution of their job, depending on those circumstances at that particular time.
Julie, what do you think about that?
He's right. It's tough. A police officer is going to be, it's not just training. They are going to be nervous when they approach a car if they're told that the number one chance of them not going home is stopping a car. But one wonders if the option in this case was just what Eric said, was to take her information and double check to see if the car was in fact stolen, or remove the individuals from the vehicle, check them to make sure they have no weapons, and not place them on burning hot ground while they wait to determine whether or not the vehicle was stolen.
Handcuffed too, and with a 6-year-old and not likely a flight risk. Guys, you provided some unbelievable commentary today. 2 great professionals. Thank you, Eric Johnson and Julie Rendelman. That's the end of our show today on the Law and Crime Network. My name is Bob Bianchi. I hope you have a great rest of the week. You be well.